Good day to everybody. This is Nicholas Bornois, President of Capital Inc., and we are the organizer of today's webinar. We are delighted to host today a webinar that will be a deep dive into dAmico International Shipping and the product tanker sector, as well as the shipping and the tanker industry in general. We are delighted to have with us Mr. Paolo dAmico, who is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of dAmico International Shipping, a major product tanker company that is listed on the Milan Stock Exchange since 2007. And also, Mr. dAmico is the Chairman of INTERTANKO, and therefore he has a wider presence and responsibility for the industry. And we have with us Mr. Ben Nolan. Ben is the head of maritime research at Stifel, a very well-known analyst. So we have really a great privilege to have both of them with us. The discussion today is going to focus essentially on three major themes. On dAmico International Shipping as the company, then on the product tanker sector, and of course, given Mr. dAmico's larger footprint in the industry and his role at Intertanku, we will talk about the tanker market as a whole and the industry initiatives that are taking place now. This is a discussion. I will now let Ben and Paolo continue. And again, thank you to everybody for being with us today into this very interesting discussion, in-depth discussion that will follow.
Great. Thank you, Nicholas. And nice office that you have there. Certainly a little bit better than my my bedroom office that I'm in at the moment. But Paolo, it's very nice to speak to you here. And why don't we get it kicked off with perhaps a discussion of what dAmico is, what the company is, maybe a profile of the fleet, how you deploy your vessels, and sort of maybe some background on the company.
Okay, thank you, and hello to everybody. dAmico is started in 1936. My grandfather was a lumber trader, and when my father and his brothers came in the business, they thought that was a good idea, instead of chartering a ship to load lumber, to own ships. So they started with sailing ships and steamships and so on. Then the war came in, we lost everything, the Marshall Plan came in, and we started again with the Liberty ships. This is just to give you a very quick history of my family thing. Today we are a fleet of 80 ships, of which 42 are product carriers. These are, and 30 are MRs, 6 are Andes, and 6 are LR1s as far as the tankers. The rest are all dry cargo. The listed company is only covering the tanker side. And we focus before on the Andes. We started, let's say, with the Andes, like everybody in the clean industry in the 60s. And we kept going with the Andes when we moved on the MRs in the 80s, and today we run the MRs and the LR1. The core of the fleet, of the tanker fleet, is in the MR because it was the workhorse of the industry. I mean, all the traders used to fix the MRs because the dimension of the stems of clean cargoes were fitted for MRs, and still is the most, let's say, flexible ship. Now, said that, if we look in the future, and probably we are going to move on the higher segment, and the MRs are going to be limited more and on a regional basis for distribution. And maybe VLR1s and VLR2s are going to get most of the long haul cargoes. Also because we do expect that the distance between the refineries and the consuming markets are going to be bigger for a number of reasons. Also because the more, let's say, the more competitive refineries are all being built in either in the East or are in the US Gulf. And being Europe the biggest diesel market, and Europe is full of old refineries, which I am afraid they are going to be closed. I think we are going to have a bigger ton-mile effect, and this will bring to an increase of size of ships. I mean, for just a matter of economy of scale. I mean, provided, of course, you have a capability ashore of tankage and terminals. So this is, let's say, the first flash, if you want to, what we are and what we are thinking of.
That's perfect. And maybe along those lines, though, a little bit maybe on how you deploy your ships relative to spot versus contract, or just sort of opportunistic, and own versus lease or charter in.
I would say that we are a mix of everything, in the sense that certainly we have always a very conservative approach. We built up in the years a very good relationship with our charterers, and I would say the majority of them are top oil companies or top traders. And we tend to cover ourselves at least between 50 and 60% of the fleet. I would say more 60 than 50. And is exactly where we are today, thanks God. And we of course charter in. We charter in on long term. We charter in on short term. And okay, the lease, the bareboats and this type of thing are more of a financial approach. So is more financially driven than, let's say, pure industrial thinking. We try to be not speculators, let's put it this way. We look long term, and we believe a lot in relationship, and it's been paying off also in very difficult times. The thing did work.
So maybe could you talk through a little bit of the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, what you've done with respect to your fleet size and focus and growth?
But I would say we are a number of ships we are declining, because we were, as far as tankers, we were with a fleet of over 50 ships, and a number also of them charter in on long term and medium term. We certainly, through the various say spikes, but also the various crises, we have been redelivering a lot of ships, and we have been also reducing, if you want, we have been selling a number of ships. But in the meantime, we also did a 22 new building program, which is been, the last ship has been delivered in September 2019, so last year, which was worth more than $700 million. And we renew the fleet, as I think we had to do, also due to the fact that the eco ship were coming in, and the older ship were, let's say, losing ground on a consumption basis. And I'm afraid they will lose even more going ahead due to the various environmental matters and emission regulations that they are going to come on us in the future, do we like it or not.
Yeah, no, and we'll get to that in a bit, and certainly appreciate your perspective as the chairman of Intertanko in a leadership position with respect to the trends in the industry there. But going back to your company, dAmico, you've, as you mentioned, finished your new building program. We've gone through periods of strength. We're currently in a period of weakness. How are you thinking about the deployment of your capital now? Is it you have shrunk? Are you looking at growth again, or repayment of debt, or preservation of cash? Any color that you maybe can shed on that?
We are, I would say, we are certainly in a very defensive position now. We are not certainly looking to new building programs. We are preserving cash. The idea is to strengthen our balance sheet and, of course, deleverage as much as we can the company, because this is, I think, what everybody should be doing today more than anything else. Said that, we are looking also to opportunities if they are there, but they must be really there. Also because I think for the first time in modern time, in modern area, in shipping, we are in front of quite big dilemmas. And this is, of course, keeping the new building order book quite down. The thing that we don't really know what the ship of the future is. Of course, we are still far away from, let's say, 2050, which is the last date of the IMO program, and is a very important very important date. But already today, you are at the risk to build a ship which is out of time, maybe after 2 years of life. And so it's better to be extremely careful what to do. The alternative to that is buy second-hand. If you want, from a number point of view, it makes even more sense. But we prefer not doing that. So on top of it, I would say we have been in the past very much driven by our charterers on our new building programs. And we certainly going to need even more in these difficult times, and have the support of the charters on what ship to do, what ship to build, and principally what sort of technology to use.
Right. Yeah. And again, I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that in a minute, but just wrapping up as it relates to the company, you're publicly listed in Milan. And first of all, any color on the thinking there in terms of being Milan listed versus in the U.S. or elsewhere, that you could add?
But look, I mean, when we listed the company, our advisor was very much of the idea of listing it in Italy because of our name, and because we are very well known where we are in my country. And I have to say, I'm very happy to be here. I hear a lot of noises that there is no liquidity. I didn't see this lack of liquidity in Milan. I mean, Italy is a huge saving country, and we have extremely strong retail market. So I didn't feel any need to go to US. US on top of that you have a dimension problem, because if you are not big enough, they don't even look to you. So I will be going to US only to look for problems. And frankly speaking, I have enough here.
Yeah, well, I can identify with that. To that end, I mean, I think as a from a market capitalization perspective, it's certainly not large cap, it's small, but maybe that fits in the context of where you are. Just do you feel any need to grow or be bigger or anything else, or is that just a U.S. problem?
Not necessarily. I mean, many investors are very happy with the dimension we are, because we control very well the company, we control very well our relationship with our charterers, we control very well our relationship with our crew, and so on and so forth. So the operation makes a lot of sense for us to be of a dimension of what it is. I don't think big is beautiful. I mean, not necessarily is. And if you look at our G&A cost, and so you make analysis of our G&A cost against even our peers, this is mathematical proven. So I don't feel that thing.
Okay, great. No, that's helpful. Now, if we can transition over into a little bit of the product tanker discussion. Well, actually, let's start with maybe something that's shipping related, but more broadly speaking, just talking about, as you were mentioning earlier, some of the new regulations that have happened, including the IMO 2020 earlier this year, but there are more with respect to further emission regulations, and as you mentioned, it is a real unknown as to what the ship of the future will look like. First of all, do you have a view on that? I mean, if you were ordering ships today, what would they look like, or would you simply just not order ships today because you don't know?
But if I was on an ordering mode, I would certainly look to the dual fuels, because on short term, because it is the only thing that you can look at. But you must also have the support of a charter who is prepared to pay the differential between a pure diesel ship and a dual fuel ship, because it's still strong. I mean, it's not on an MR can be easily $8 million. So. It's fantastic. I mean, when you read about the things that can be done and whatever, and even declaration of intent by many big companies is a thing, but when you sit down and you try to put together a contract, it's a completely different story, and nobody's prepared to pay for it. So
yeah.
If there is the opportunity to make something which makes sense, of course we are here, but it's not that easy.
Yeah. Now, along those lines, obviously it seems like with respect to alternative fuels, well, let's back up. So there was IMO 2020 brought on many ship owners putting scrubbers on due to probably a myriad of reasons, but that hasn't proven to be just a fantastic investment, at least thus far. We are in sort of a period where LNG is making strides, I would say, as a ship fuel, and potentially in the infancy of other fuel types. You hear a lot about green ammonia or hydrogen or LPG or other things. From where you sit right now, if you had to predict, I don't know, 10 years from now, what do you think it will be the winner, let's say, if you had to pick one?
Let's say 10 years is a short-term thing. Even if at 2030 we have an IMO an IMO requirement coming in, because we have to cut down emission by 40% against 2008, if I'm not wrong. So this is something, but it's something which is I wouldn't say easily achievable, but is achievable with a meaning that we have with systems that we have today. We out flying on hydrogen or ammonia. Well, will be a problem certainly is 2050. I don't know how much is going to be my problem, but I mean, it's certainly a difficult thing. Where I see I think the next 10 years we will still be on fuel, and of course low sulfur. Probably we are going to see it also even on diesel. I mean, today diesel is in some port like Singapore by few dollars, but is even cheaper than very low sulfur. So, okay, this is due to a specific market contingency thing. I mean, there is a lot of middle distillate around, and they don't know what to do with it. But in 10 years, we're going to be there with some, of course, LNG powered ships and dual fuel ships. But I don't see a big change from here to there. The change is going to happen afterwards, and that is going to be a big question mark. Is a big question mark.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's I think an important topic for many reasons, but I think you're right. It seems like there's not yet a definitive solution, and that leads into the next question. So there has obviously, for product tankers, but really for almost all ship types, been very little ordering going on. That has given rise to a certain degree of optimism on the part of ship owners. Hasn't as much been translated to investors, but that hey, you know, order book is low. At least half of the equation between supply and demand is manageable, to say the least. And furthermore, it doesn't feel like there is much appetite to incrementally be ordering ships because, as you said, nobody knows what those ships are going to look like into the future. With that kind of a backdrop, which I think we probably can both agree on, are you optimistic or neutral or pessimistic? Let's say in the near term. Well, in the next 12 months, how do you feel about the market over the next 12 months?
Look, the market has been. Let's forget a second about the spike that we had on the first half, because was even unhealthy. We are paying back all the money we made there, so I wouldn't even take any consideration. The market has been hit by this pandemic, which is, of course, is a unique situation, and so on very short term, I am very cautious, very prudent. I think the fourth quarter of this year is not going to be this exceptional thing. We must forget historical numbers, because it's not going to be like all the other fourth quarters of the past. Certainly demand is going to be a little bit stronger of a third one, but I frankly see a lot of softness around. I see traders, big traders, reputable traders and oil companies with ships due with charter finishing in this period of the year, redelivering ships, which is not a very good sign, because normally, especially traders who trade the ship, they normally keep the ship for the fourth quarter. They don't redeliver it. So also the view, I would say, of the oil operators are quite negative, but said that is very short term.
Sure.
Now, I think this pessimism is very much, of course, COVID driven. I think that the moment that the vaccine will be out, probably even only the news that the vaccine is out is going to change a lot of things, maybe including our market. Certainly, once people are getting more, people trusting more of the system and trusting the fact that they can travel again, because one element which is destroying the market today is the lack of jet fuel. Right. I mean, not the lack of jet fuel, the lack of flights. So, and this is really creating a huge problem. Yeah. Very good for the environment, because we do not have all these planes going around, but I can tell you, is a quite strong thing. So when the system will be back on its feet, I think the market will certainly improve and will certainly go the other way. And then at that moment, the fundamentals that you were talking about before, I mean, the low new building program, the low new building ordering, and the fact that ships certainly are going to be scrapped in this period, because I don't see any reason why you should keep a 20 or 23 or 24-year-old ship.
Right.
I'm talking 24-year-old because they are still around 24-year-old ships.
Right.
Then the fundamentals will kick in, and I think the market will recover, and will recover very well, and I think we'll recover for quite a while.
Well, your lips to God's ears, I hope. But that said, I think BP, for instance, has come out, and they're definitely the outlier, but has said that, well, they think that oil demand peaked in 2019, and that from here it's just going to be a gradual but linear downward slope, because consumption habits have changed, and oil is losing share to gas and renewables. Who knows what the future will hold there? I don't think either of us are probably in a great spot to give clear predictions. But how much does a risk of something like that play into your thinking, or do you think the thinking of the broader tanker market as a whole?
I think oil will be around the leaks for the next 10, 15 years, no problem.
Yeah.
And I think will be still the majority of the energy mix, do we like it or not. Did the oil peak in 2019? I have no idea. I heard the story of oil peaking so many times that I don't know what. I mean, probably it did, or probably is going to happen in our time. I think oil will be there for quite a while. Of course, we cannot forget, and this is something I just jump a second to the Intertanku position. This is something that we are talking in Intertanku a lot. We must realize that oil is not there forever, and here again, probably for my generation, we are going to have enough oil to go ahead. But for the next one, they certainly have to think of something different. And gas is just a bridge to this something different. I mean, gas is not going to be the solution. Is you have an emission problem also via LNG anyhow.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Although, to your point, a product tanker can be a 25-year asset, and if you're ordering it today or you don't get it for a few years, I mean, you're very close to 30-year useful life. A lot can happen in 30 years, and so again, if the world changes in that time period, then it's worth at least bearing in mind, right? In terms of capital deployment.
But we are still we still need ships, because I mean 2/3 of a planet is covered by sea. So if you want to move something around, I mean, you need that. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so again, sort of sticking in the product tanker side of the story a little bit, and you touched on, how you would envision perhaps the fleet to, on average, continue to grow with respect to the average size of the ships, and maybe trending more towards the LRs and the MRs. But do you have any hope that, or thinking that perhaps the product tanker market can, over at least a medium period of time, outperform the crude tanker market at all?
It could. I mean, it could. I mean, I think the crude market today, the products are more or less 35% of a volume of oil move on water, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take 100 as the total oil moved on water, 35 are product and 65 is crude. So crude is still very much the king in town. But say that, also the crude fleet is by far bigger. And so there is a balance in this.
Sure.
What is certainly going to happen, because it is in front of us, the producing countries or countries very close to the producing ones are building an incredible big refining capacity and capability. If you think of what India has been doing, and of course what is being doing in the Middle East, you see that there is they are looking for the added value out of the barrel, and this it will certainly increase, of course, the ship size in the product segment and the demand for product carriers. Because in the meantime, continents like Europe will be obsolete in refining terms. I think a lot of refinery in Europe will be closing down, and I think COVID is accelerating this process. I mean, this process was already in the cards, but COVID is accelerating it. And you know, to close a refinery in Europe is not very easy due to trade unions problems, and so on and so forth. And COVID is also giving a good reason to the company to say, look, there's no way I can keep refining here, so I have to close the thing. So I think it's a process will happen. And you're going to have peaks where product carrier can outperform the crude system. This is going to be a structural thing? I don't know, to be frank.
And just sort of along those lines, just to kind of wrap up a little bit on the product tanker side and the market side, do you, oftentimes we hear, especially for the larger product tankers, the LR1, LR2s, that they get 15 years of age and they are less attractive to the charterers, and they tend to shift to the crude market and they stay there for the remainder of their lives. You don't hear as much about that in the smaller assets, but it probably happens some. Do you think that's changing at all? And in the short term, have you seen any shifts there lately in the market?
But you see, what used to be that the product, the ships used to stay in the clean market, let's say up to 15 years, and then they were moving to dirty more than crude. I mean, they were moving to fuel.
Right.
Now, fuel is another commodity on the way out, because the new generation of refineries, they don't produce fuel at all. The fuel market is being saved by not too much by the bunker, because the high sulfur is quite limited today, and will be more and more limited. But today they are using a high sulfur fuel as a byproduct for the modern refinery, especially in the United States, and they can recrack the commodity and get our diesel and gasoline out of it. But how long this is going to happen, I don't know. So what is going to disappear is fuels itself, and then you don't need any more ship for fuel. Where probably a product carrier can go is in veg oils, in soya oils, and so on. But even there, you're entering in the food chain. So I don't know how long they are going to accept that. So all this is going to be more and more complicated going ahead.
That's really interesting, and not really something that I've spent a whole lot of time on. Do you think that reduces the life of product tanker fleet, or do you think that they'll make the jump straight from clean to crude rather than the intermediate fuel business?
No, I think will shorten up the life of a product carrier. Product carrier is a very let's say it lives for quite a long time. The average age of a product carrier ship is 24 years.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous. A crude carrier, it goes to 21, 22 maximum.
Interesting. Well, yeah, it's definitely something that I would say a lot of people aren't talking about, but is an interesting dynamic that is probably new now, post IMO 2020. But now switching a little bit to, if you can put on the hat of the chairman of the Intertanko, and well, first of all, I'm sure almost everybody here is familiar, but quickly, what does Intertanko do, and what's your role there?
Intertanku is protecting as far as it can the interest of all the tanker owners who are, of course, members. And I mean, doing the interest of the members, we do also the interest of the non-members, because we all belong to the same industry. And we are trying, and I think trying with quite a success, because it's a fantastic association, not for me, but for its history and for the people who have been working in it. They are trying a lot of, they are giving a lot of added value in the rules and regulation which are coming in. I wouldn't say we are lobbying, because it's a term and I don't like, but I mean, we are certainly giving the opinion, and we are here an opinion which has some specific gravity by all the institutions, and starting from the IMO, which is, let's say, our home. And I would say the chairman has to do the job of being the guy who doesn't tell too many stupidities altogether. And anyhow, helping the machinery to move and move as smoothly as it can. We are many members, and so you know, many members. They bring a lot of value to the industry, but you have also to remember that there are many people around, so you have to make happy everybody.
So from that perspective, as chairman of Intertanko, representing really all tanker owners, what do you think is the biggest risk, especially from a regulatory perspective? That's really where you have, as you say, not lobbying, but trying to exercise some influence. Where's the biggest risk, and that you are sort of focused on?
What I feel really is the shipping is a global industry, and we are going everywhere, in all continents, in all countries, in all economic zones, and so on and so forth. For us, is paramount. It is absolutely imperative that IMO keeps the position it has today and is not weakened by regional actions. I'm referring a little bit to the emission trading that rules that Europe wants to impose, and I'm very worried about that, because let's forget the complexity of the thing, but it's very important that we have one body to follow, and we cannot start following many ones. Already United States, it took a position with OPA 90 at the time, and it's been an issue. If also Europe takes its position in different things and so on and so forth, will be very difficult for us to trade our ships everywhere, because we cannot follow everybody on everything. So it's important we keep one body, and I think IMO is our body more than anybody else.
Well, as you were discussing there, maybe talk a little bit about the emissions trading system that that is being implemented or proposed or developed by the EU, and what that might mean for European ship owners.
I think, but it's not too much of European ship owners. Is I would say to European trade, and we'll end up in an increase of cost for the European trade, and we'll end up also in something that we have to think about every time that we are coming to Europe. We have to change. System, or IMO has to accept this system against other ones, but it's not. I wouldn't say is the most efficient one. I every time that I try to learn it, it's complicated.
Yeah,
because we start being sort of traders of credits and debits and this thing, which is really going to be an headache.
Yeah. Well, it's especially, as you say, if there's not uniformity across geographies, that always creates winners and losers, even if it's not the intent. But another thing that we haven't really touched on, but it does relate to both your company as well as your position at Intertanko, is some of the COVID fallout, especially as it relates to things like crewing and the safety of the crews and the transfer of crews and all of the things that are different now than they were 9 months ago, and more complicated. Could you maybe talk through a little bit about what you're doing there as a company and as an industry, or the leader of a group representing the industry?
Look, I would say the two main problems have been certainly the crew problem. I would just talk in a minute. And the second one has been the vettings, because we have to have our ships approved. To have our ships approved, we need inspections. To do inspection was not that easy. I mean, it was close to impossible. And so we end up with the fantastic cooperation of the oil companies, I would say. We end up with a remote system, which is permitting today to keep the system working. Without that, we are dead today. Going back to the crew is a very serious thing. I mean, unfortunately, governments do not. First of all, they are always looking to the COVID problem in their backyard, and they are not looking at the global thing. Even if on the crew problem, even the United Nations came out with, let's say, let's call it a suggestion, if not a recommendation. The point is that government do not understand that seafarers are top people. Let's say they are, how you call it?
Necessary, or
no, they are what we call essential workers. Essential workers.
Right.
And without them, the whole chain on energy, but I would even say on food, will be at risk. All the distributing chain. So we cannot just forget them. It's not, number one, is a human thing. You cannot keep people on board of a ship for more than a year, telling them, look, be patient, because one day you're going to go home. It's ridiculous. Number one, he wants to go home. And number two is covering the job of somebody else who is idle home and wants to go to work, and he cannot do it.
Right.
So we need a fast track with in all the system, in countries, through visas, immigration, procedures for testing on the COVID. And I would even add one more, that when the vaccine will be out, 1, 2, 3, 4, how many are going to be? You're not going to use it on everybody in the world, so all together at once. I mean, it's going to come in by stages. And certainly the medical people are going to be the first one, and then the older generation and so on and so forth. I would like that the seafarers are in the fast track in this case, because they have to be immune more before anybody else.
Right.
Because otherwise the system is really in a problem.
Right. Well, no, it's we've certainly seen that in the last number of months, and you're right. I mean, it's hard to imagine somebody who's been at sea for 9 months who can't even get home to see his family. So not sustainable, to say the least. So we've covered a lot of ground and talked a lot about the business and the industry and your company. And so wrapping up here, just a question that I like to ask in these kind of situations is, what would you do if, all of a sudden turns out there was an extra few zeros in the back of your cash account, and you had $100 extra million of cash to spend at the company. Where's the best value for you if you had free money? Is it new builds, secondhand assets, your own shares, paying down debt, dividends? I don't know. How do you think about free money today?
I would say my priority today would be still deleverage. One, be a stronger company, which doesn't mean a bigger company in terms of fleet. I would certainly look at dividends for the good of my shareholders, starting from myself. And I will be looking certainly a new building. You cannot not look to new building, because if you don't build at a certain point, you are out of a game. You cannot leave out only our second-hand ships. If you want to deliver a good service to the other company the way we are trying to do, and I think we are succeeding in doing it. So certainly new build will be a certain point in the list, but we have to be extremely careful what sort of technology we are going to use at that point.
Yeah. Well, all of that makes sense, and I think that does it for any questions that I have, and I certainly appreciate your time. Also appreciate Nicholas and Capital Link for including me here. I don't know, Nicholas, if there were any last words that you wanted to add.
Yes, I would like to say to both of you a big thank you. Obviously, this has been a tremendously interesting and insightful discussion. Thank you, Paolo, and thank you, Ben. We don't have the chance very often to discuss with captains of the industry like we have done today. And exactly the idea of this webinar is not to do a quick gloss over 10-15-minute discussion, but to really go in depth in a variety of critical issues for the sector, the company, and of course for the industry. And with Paolo's background and footprint and presence in the industry today, we are grateful to have him. And of course, Ben, as always, you have been a tremendous moderator. So thank you to both of you. This webinar will be available for replay for quite some time. So we'll give the opportunity to people to visit it again and again from all over the world. Again, thank you very much, and we can conclude our discussion.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, Ben.